I never imagined that one random Sunday would detonate my entire life as I knew it. The day started normally enough. I dropped our two boys, ages 15 and 10, off at their friend's place for a few hours of playtime. My husband and I have been married for about 16 years, and while we're not perfect, we had what I thought was a stable, loving home. Two healthy kids, decent jobs despite the rising cost of living in the UK, and a family network that, for the most part, got along just fine. I was content, which is not something everyone can say these days. But when I returned home that afternoon, the atmosphere felt charged. My husband asked if we had the house to ourselves for a moment, and he looked almost nervous, like a teenager about to confess something. I thought maybe he wanted to discuss some home improvement project, or perhaps a holiday plan. He'd been talking vaguely about a trip next year. I certainly didn't expect him to pull out a printed poster advertising some sort of orgy, with beaches and clubs mentioned, and explain a concept he called a gaycation. He tried to say it casually, as though it were a normal thing. It's where straight men go on holiday, somewhere sunny with sand and booze, and they become gay for the duration of the trip. I stared at him, absolutely dumbfounded. He rattled on. It apparently doesn't count as cheating or even as being gay because, according to him, what happens on the gaycation stays on the gaycation. I was speechless, just utterly lost for words. I thought, is this a joke? Maybe it's some bizarre prank he read online. He then dropped the real bombshell. He was looking into booking a trip to Ibiza next year with my brother-in-law, his sister's husband, specifically for this so-called gaycation. He sounded so matter-of-fact about it, as though discussing a lad's football weekend. My silence must have stretched too long because he began justifying it. How straight men apparently do this all the time, how it's a cultural thing that I just wouldn't understand. When I finally found my voice, I asked him directly, "Are you gay?" I was trying to stay calm, not to judge. If he was coming out after so many years, we'd have to deal with that honestly, for our sake and for the kids. But he swore up and down that he's not gay, that he's 100% into women, into me. So then I asked if maybe he's bisexual. He got defensive and said I was making accusations. He insisted this wasn't about orientation. It's about an experience. A gaycation is like going to an aquarium, he said. You go to observe, to immerse yourself temporarily, but you don't become a fish. It was the strangest analogy I'd ever heard. I tried to unpack it logically. If he's not attracted to men, why does he need to experience gay sex? He claimed it's inevitable once the gaycation starts, that men can't resist it and must surrender themselves mind, body, and soul or be destroyed. He said this with a straight face, as if quoting some ancient prophecy. My jaw nearly hit the floor. This wasn't just cheating territory. This was sexual nonsense. I told him I'm not comfortable, that even if he were bi, this would be cheating, no question. He got angry, insisting it's not cheating because it doesn't count. At that point, I was done. I left the room, left him to stew in whatever fantasy he was living in. For the rest of that Sunday, I barely spoke to him. But by dinner time, I tried one last time to understand. Why risk our marriage for something he claims he has no actual desire for? He repeated that it's a normal thing straight men do, that he's late to the party, that I'm basically holding him back from some rite of passage. I said if he loves me, he won't do it. If he does go, our marriage is over. He didn't respond. His silence spoke volumes. In the following days, I noticed he was genuinely torn up. He called in sick to work on Monday and only managed a half day on Tuesday. He looked distraught, like a man caught between two worlds. I wondered if maybe he's secretly gay or bi and can't face it. Maybe he's latched onto this insane gaycation narrative as a way to rationalize his desires without admitting them. Regardless, I knew I couldn't live with this denial. I wanted honest dialogue about orientation, about what he wants, but all he gave me was this bizarre script. I decided to tell his sister, my sister-in-law, what was happening. I dreaded that call, imagining her reaction. She ended up screaming at me initially, calling me a liar, and even accusing me of trying to break up her marriage. When she calmed down and I explained it step by step, she broke down too. Because guess what? My husband's partner in crime in this gaycation plan is her husband, my brother-in-law. That means her marriage is facing the same insanity. We arranged for my parents to watch the boys and planned to meet up to discuss everything. But before that meeting could happen, I texted my husband, told him he'd need to find somewhere else to sleep that night, that a bag would be waiting for him. That was met with anger, panic, and a barrage of calls I ignored. I knew I had to stand firm. My trust was shattered. Let him go on his gaycation alone if he must, but not as my husband. At some point, I got advice to test his logic by reversing the scenario. If he insists that what happens on the gaycation doesn't count, what if I said I'd go on a straightcation somewhere else, sleeping with other men, no strings attached? The moment I tried that line of reasoning, he exploded. Completely different, he said. My hypothetical adventure would just be straight up cheating. While his gaycation is some special exception, the hypocrisy was deafening. He started crying when I suggested my own fling, saying the thought of me with another man broke his heart, but that relationships need sacrifices, so he grudgingly agreed that after his gaycation, I'd get a week in Manchester to do whatever I wanted. He said it with tears in his eyes. The sheer absurdity of it almost made me laugh. Instead, I calmly told him to get out of my house. Thankfully, he left quietly. By now, my in-laws got involved. My mother-in-law rang me, screaming insults. I just told her to ask her son about the gaycation. She hung up furious. Later, I got another call from her in tears, apologizing, saying she had confronted my husband, and he spun the same nonsense to them. My father-in-law ended up on the phone too, equally stunned and angry. They kicked him out of their place as well after he tried to crash there. They saw through the madness in an instant, and he texted me afterward, accusing me of using the gaycation concept to destroy his marriage and life and calling me homophobic. I realized this man was beyond reason. I blocked his number and decided to change the locks, dip into the joint account, and prepare for a divorce. It cost me $500 for the locksmith, but worth every penny for peace of mind. Then there was the other marriage under threat, my sister-in-law's. She confronted her husband, my brother-in-law. She put me on mute but let me listen in. She asked him what a gaycation was, hoping he'd act confused. Instead, he launched into the same scripted explanation. He too talked of sissy hypnoporn, permanent pseudo-gayness, and how some men never return from the gaycation. The whole monologue sounded like the product of a feverish internet fetish subculture. My sister-in-law wept, trying to make sense of it, pointing out that if he wants gay sex, isn't he just gay or bi? He insisted no, that's the beauty of it. No emotional investment, no wider gay life experience. It's not gay if it's just sex in a vacuum, apparently. She ended up giving him a choice. Leave now or she would. He chose to leave, mumbling about how she just doesn't understand. After he left, we talked, both of us stunned. We wondered what we did wrong, what cosmic joke led our husbands to believe in this bizarre concept. Turns out my other sister-in-law, my husband's older sister, recalled my husband and brother-in-law asking about BDSM cross-dressing boot camps a couple of years back. So this isn't new, it's been brewing quietly in the background. I'm considering going through bank statements and devices to find evidence of affairs. Because, let's face it, they must have gotten these ideas somewhere. Maybe they've already cheated or have been exploring fetish communities online. The truth might be even uglier than I suspect. As for my boys, what do I tell them? Their father suddenly isn't coming home. They'll notice the locks are changed, that mom and dad aren't speaking. I'll have to say we're going through some issues and keep it age appropriate. I can't poison them against their father with details they can't understand yet, but eventually they'll know something changed forever on that strange Sunday. My plan now? Get a lawyer. File for divorce. My in-laws are on my side, and that's a relief. They're furious with their son. My sister-in-law's marriage is also likely finished. Our once close family is in ruins because two men decided they could rewrite the rules of sexuality and fidelity to suit their fantasies. It's beyond infuriating. It's humiliating. I feel betrayed not just as a wife, but as a human being who expected basic honesty. I keep replaying the moment he showed me that poster. That's when my old life ended. He truly believed he could convince me this was normal, that he could vanish to Ibiza, have sex with men, and return as if nothing mattered. The aquarium analogy still haunts me. As if observing fish is like engaging in sex acts with men, as if that's a thing that doesn't count and can just be rinsed out of one's memory with a shrug. This entire ordeal has been surreal, like stepping into a parallel dimension where logic doesn't apply. But I must accept it as my new reality. He's gone off the deep end, and I refuse to follow him. My priority now is securing my finances, my home, and ensuring my boys have a stable life. I have a support network, my family, my in-laws who apologized and are supportive now, and my sister-in-law who's going through a similar nightmare. In a twisted way, having someone else going through the exact same nonsense, my sister-in-law, makes me feel less alone. Together, maybe we'll piece together what the hell happened. We'll share lawyer contacts, compare notes, and try to protect ourselves. I'm furious that they had the audacity to call us homophobic, as if objecting to blatant cheating is homophobia. I have zero issue with consensual adult relationships of any orientation, but this is about honesty, trust, and respect. They twisted something harmless, sexual orientation, into a bizarre excuse to break trust without consequences. It's insulting to actual gay people who must find this gaycation concept absurd and offensive. I'm done being the reasonable one. I'll move forward legally and emotionally. Let him cry about losing his marriage. Let him blame the gaycation for ruining his life. I know the truth. He made a choice, embraced a ridiculous fantasy, and lost everything. Once I've filed for divorce and set up legal boundaries, I'll focus on healing. I'll explain age-appropriately to my boys that their father made some bad decisions that hurt our family. Maybe in time, he'll come to terms with who he is and what he wants. Maybe he'll realize how childish and disrespectful he's been. Maybe he'll try to mend the relationship with the kids one day. I don't know. Right now, I can't worry about that. I have to protect myself and them. As for me, I'm shell-shocked but determined. I'll rebuild. I have a job, I have my parents, I have my dignity. My husband can keep his so-called gaycation and all the nonsensical rules that come with it. I want no part in a man who thinks marriage vows are optional if you slap a silly label on a holiday fling. It's going to be a rough path ahead. Lawyers, financial untangling, emotional fallout, helping my kids adjust. But I know one thing for certain, I'd rather face these challenges than remain married to someone who mocks my intelligence and loyalty by claiming that sleeping with other men in Ibiza isn't cheating because it's like an aquarium. I'll close this chapter as soon as possible. He's out of the house, the locks are changed, the joint account funds secured. Let him drift in his fantasy alone. I'm stepping into reality and saving myself and my boys from any further madness. Life may never be the same, but at least I know I stood up for truth, respect, and honesty when it mattered most.